When I unlocked my mother's front door after the funeral, the house no longer belonged to us. Before I go any further, before this memory tightens around my chest the way it still does, let me ask you something, my besties, because I feel closer when I know where you're listening from. Are you here with me in the US, somewhere in the UK, or listening from another corner of the world? Tell me in the comments. And as you listen, I want you to ask yourself what you would have done in my place. This is Voice of Mrs. Addison, and this story is not easy to tell, but it's an honest one. Don't forget to like and subscribe as a guide for stories like this, because what I'm about to share still wakes me up some nights. I was still wearing black when I found out. The kind of black that doesn't come from fashion, but from obligation. The kind that smells faintly of lilies and funeral home carpet cleaner. My shoes were dusty from the cemetery, my eyes swollen from crying into strangers' shoulders, and my hands were shaking, not from grief alone, but from exhaustion. The deep, hollow kind that settles into your bones after you've done everything alone. I had just buried my mother. Alone. The service had been quiet. Too quiet for a woman who spent her life filling rooms with laughter and the sound of wooden spoons clinking against pots. The wind moved through the trees like it was whispering secrets, and I remember thinking, she would have hated this cold. My mother liked warmth. Warm kitchens. Warm conversations. Warm forgiveness, even when it wasn't deserved. My sister didn't come. She said she couldn't handle funerals. Said grief made her spiral. Her words, not mine. I remember reading her text the night before the service while I sat on the edge of a stiff motel bed, ironing my black dress with shaky hands. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, waiting for the message to change. Waiting for a follow-up. It never came. So I stood graveside alone, listening to the dull thud of earth, holding a single white rose, and telling myself I would deal with my sister later, because grief is a way of rearranging your priorities. Or so I thought. The drive back to our childhood home felt like moving through a dream. That familiar road with its cracked pavement and overgrown hedges. The same mailbox leaning slightly to the left, the paint chipped just the way Dad left it before he passed. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, engine running, hands on the steering wheel, just breathing. That house had raised us. Every scraped knee. Every slammed teenage door. Every Christmas argument that somehow ended in laughter by dessert. The porch light still flickered the way it always had, and for a brief, foolish moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, everything would stay the same. The key slid into the lock easily. Too easily. Inside, the air felt wrong. Hollow. Like a room after movers leave. The familiar smell of furniture polish and old books was gone, replaced by something sharp and unfamiliar. Citrus. Chemical. Clean in a way that felt invasive. The hallway was empty. No coat rack by the door. No framed photos along the wall. The little table where Mom used to drop her keys was gone, leaving behind a pale square on the wood floor like a scar. I took a step forward, my heel echoing louder than it should have, and my stomach tightened. I called out, "Hello," even though I knew no one would answer. The living room was stripped bare. No couch. No armchair, where Mom used to knit while watching old game shows. No clock ticking above the fireplace, the one Dad bought at a flea market because he liked the way it chimed on the hour. All gone. The walls looked naked, stripped of decades of life, like someone had erased us. My heart began to pound, slow at first, then harder. I walked into the kitchen, each step heavier than the last. The table was gone. The curtains Mom sewed herself, gone. Even the little crack in the tile by the sink seemed more exposed without everything else around it. It felt like standing in someone else's house, wearing my mother's grief like a coat that didn't fit anymore. That's when I saw it. A folded document on the bare counter. White paper. Crisp. Official. My name wasn't on it, but my sister's was. I remember my hands hovering over the paper, not touching it yet. A strange buzzing filled my ears, like my body was warning me, don't. My sister's name looked foreign printed there, bold and confident, as if it belonged more than mine ever had. I unfolded the document slowly. Words like transfer, sale, authorized signature blurred together as my vision swam. The date stamped at the bottom caught my eye, sharp and merciless. It was dated 3 days ago. 3 days ago, I was choosing my mother's casket. 3 days ago, I was signing funeral home paperwork with trembling hands. 3 days ago, my sister sold our mother's house. My knees gave out, and I had to grip the counter to stay upright. The room felt like it was tilting, like the ground beneath me was finally giving way after holding me together through the burial. She had done it while I was burying Mom. The silence in that empty house pressed in on me, heavy and unforgiving. And in that moment, surrounded by bare walls and stolen memories, one question screamed louder than all the others. How long had she been planning this? I didn't know it yet, but the answer would change everything I thought I knew about my sister and about the woman who raised us both. And that truth was already waiting for me. I stayed in that empty kitchen longer than I cared to admit. Not crying, not screaming, just standing there, reading that document over and over like the words might rearrange themselves into something kinder if I stared long enough. The counter felt cold under my palms, and for a moment, I thought I might faint, but grief has a way of making you stubborn. It keeps you upright when logic says you should fall. I folded the paper back the way I found it. Neat. Controlled. Almost respectful. That, more than anything, felt like an insult. Because my sister had always been good at looking respectful. Growing up, people used to call us opposites. I was the quiet one, the helper, the one who stayed behind to wash dishes after Sunday dinner. My sister, Elaine, was bright, charming, quick with her smile and quicker with her excuses. Teachers loved her. Neighbors admired her confidence. And my mother made excuses for her. Elaine just has a lot of feelings, Mom would say, stirring soup on the stove. She doesn't mean harm, she'd insist, even when harm had already been done. I learned early to be the reliable one. I stayed close to home while Elaine left the moment she could. New cities, new relationships, new dreams that always seemed to require someone else footing the bill. When Dad died, it was me who moved back in to help Mom. Me who learned her medication schedule, who fixed the loose cabinet hinge, who sat with her through sleepless nights when arthritis gnawed at her joints like a restless animal. Elaine visited when it suited her. Always with big promises. Always with reasons she couldn't stay long. She's busy, Mom would say, smoothing her apron like she was smoothing over disappointment. You know how your sister is. I did know. That's what made the betrayal sting sharper, because somewhere deep down, I had sensed something coming. I just didn't want to name it. After Dad passed, Mom added my name to the utility bills. Just in case, she said. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes held something serious. She asked me once, just once, what I thought should happen to the house when she was gone. I told her the truth. It's yours, Mom. Whatever you want. She smiled then. A small, knowing smile that lingered longer than it should have. At the time, I didn't understand why. Now, standing in that stripped kitchen, I wondered if she had been trying to tell me something without saying it outright. The first real clue came weeks before her death. Elaine had started calling more often, not checking on Mom, on me, asking questions that felt misplaced. So, are all the documents still in the house? She asked once, her voice light, almost bored. What documents? I replied, stirring tea. Oh, you know. Deeds. Insurance. That sort of thing. Another time, she asked if Mom still had full mental capacity, using those exact words. I remember laughing awkwardly, brushing it off. Elaine being Elaine, I told myself. Always dramatic. Always thinking 5 steps ahead. But now those conversations replayed in my mind, sharper, heavier, like stones dropping one by one into my chest. I picked up my phone and called her. Straight to voicemail. I called again. And again. Finally, on the 4th try, she answered. What? She snapped, like I had interrupted something important. I'm at Mom's house, I said. My voice surprised me, steady, almost calm. A pause. Just a fraction of a second. Oh, she said. Already. Already. That single word landed like a slap. Elaine, I said slowly, why is the house empty? Another pause. Longer this time. Then she sighed. A practice sigh. The kind people use when they're about to explain something they've already justified to themselves. I took care of it, she said. Someone had to. Took care of what? I asked, even though my hands were already shaking again. The house. The bills. The sale, she replied, like she was listing groceries. You were busy. Busy. Burying our mother. You sold it, I whispered. Yes, she said, sharper now. Defensive. And, before you get dramatic, everything was legal. That word again. Legal. I asked her how. She told me she had power of attorney. Said Mom signed it months ago. Said Mom didn't want complications. Said Mom trusted her. Each sentence felt like a knife pressed just a little deeper. I handled everything, Elaine continued. You always get emotional. This way was cleaner. Cleaner. I looked around at the bare walls, the stripped floors, the absence of every memory we'd ever made, and felt something inside me finally crack. You did this while I was planning her funeral, I said. She didn't deny it. I didn't think you'd notice so soon, she replied. That was the moment grief turned into something else. Something colder. More focused. After the call ended, I sat on the floor of that empty living room until the sun dipped low enough to cast long shadows across the walls. My phone buzzed once, a message from Elaine. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. But it already was. That night, I slept in my car, parked in the driveway of a house that no longer belonged to me. The silence was unbearable. No ticking clock. No hum of the refrigerator. Just the weight of questions pressing in. If Mom really signed those papers, why hadn't she told me? And if she hadn't, what else had my sister done behind my back? I didn't know it yet, but the answers were already written down, tucked away somewhere my sister never thought to look. And when I found them, nothing would ever be the same. The next morning, I woke with my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. I'd slept in short, restless stretches, the kind where you never fully drift off, just hover somewhere between exhaustion and panic. My neck ached from the car seat. The windows were fogged with my breath, and for a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I saw the house through the windshield, silent, empty, and everything came rushing back. Elaine's voice. The paperwork. The word legal. I sat there until the sun climbed higher, forcing myself to breathe slowly, the way Mom used to teach me when anxiety threatened to take over. One thing at a time, she'd say, pressing her warm palm over mine. Panic never solved anything. So I chose one thing. I needed proof. Not anger. Not assumptions. Proof. The first place I went was the county records office. The building smelled like old paper and disinfectant, and the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I took a number and sat in a hard plastic chair, watching people come and go with folders tucked under their arms, each one carrying their own quiet crisis. When my number was called, I slid up to the counter and asked, as calmly as I could, for records related to my mother's property. The clerk, a woman with tired eyes and reading glasses perched low on her nose, typed for a moment, then frowned slightly. It shows a transfer was completed, she said. Signed by power of attorney. My chest tightened. May I see the document? She hesitated, then nodded, disappearing into the back. When she returned, she slid a copy across the counter. The signature leapt out at me immediately. It looked like my mother's name, but it wasn't. Mom's handwriting had always been careful, rounded, deliberate. This signature was rushed, slanted, wrong in a way that was impossible to explain unless you knew her as well as I did. My hands trembled as I traced the ink with my eyes. This doesn't look like her, I said quietly. The clerk studied it again, her expression unreadable. If you believe the signature was forged, she said slowly, you should speak to an attorney. Forged. The word echoed in my head long after I left the building. On my way back to the house, even though it no longer felt like it, I stopped at a storage facility a few miles away. One of those last-minute decisions guided more by instinct than logic. Mom had rented a small unit years ago to store seasonal decorations and old boxes she couldn't bring herself to throw away. Elaine didn't know about it.
I did.
The unit smelled like dust and cardboard and time. I stood there in the dim light, surrounded by boxes labeled in Mom's handwriting. Photos, Christmas, important. My pulse quickened as I opened the one marked important. Inside were folders, old tax documents, medical records, and at the very bottom, a cream-colored envelope with my name written across the front. Not Elaine's.
Mine.
I sat on the concrete floor and stared at it for a long time before opening it. The paper inside was thick, the kind Mom liked. The handwriting was unmistakable. My dearest, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to say all of this out loud. My throat tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't read any further. I know your sister. I love her, but I know her. And I know what grief and money can do to her. That's why I made arrangements. The house is yours. It has always been meant for you. I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. She went on to explain that she had updated her 6 months earlier. That she had revoked any power of attorney Elaine once held after a confusing conversation that left her uneasy. That she had placed copies with her lawyer, and one here, where she knew I would find it if something didn't feel right. Trust your instincts, she wrote. They have never failed you. I pressed the letter to my chest and cried, not the loud, shattering sobs of the funeral, but something quieter, something steadier. Grief laced with resolve. Elaine hadn't just betrayed me. She had underestimated our mother. The next step was the attorney. His office was small and smelled faintly of coffee and leather-bound books. He listened without interrupting as I laid everything out, the calls, the paperwork, the empty house. When I handed him Mom's letter and the updated will, his eyebrows lifted slightly. This changes everything, he said. He explained it in careful, measured terms. The forged signature, the invalid power of attorney, the fraudulent sale. Each word stacked neatly on the next, forming something solid where chaos had been. The sale can be challenged, he said. And based on this, you have a strong case. A strong case. For the first time since Mom died, I felt something like balance return. Elaine called that night. I let it ring. She texted instead. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, thinking of Mom's careful handwriting, of the envelope hidden away like a quiet shield. I typed back 3 words. Talk to my lawyer. The response came quickly. You wouldn't dare. I looked around the small motel room I'd finally checked into, at the letter folded carefully on the bedside table. Oh, but I would. What Elaine didn't realize yet, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that the law was already leaning in my favor. And soon, so would the truth. Elaine showed up 3 days later. No warning. No apology. Just her car pulling into the driveway like she still had every right in the world to be there. I watched from the motel window across the street, my coffee going cold in my hands, my heart beating with a steadiness that surprised me. Grief had softened me.
Betrayal sharpened me.
She stepped out wearing sunglasses too big for her face, lipstick perfectly applied, her posture straight and defensive. She looked the way she always did when she thought she was in control, like someone bracing for a storm she believed she could outtalk. I met her at the porch. She didn't hug me, didn't ask how I was holding up. She just crossed her arms and sighed. You didn't have to involve a lawyer, she said, like I had overreacted. I didn't invite her inside. There's nothing to talk about, I replied. You forged Mom's signature. Her mouth tightened. You don't know that. I do, I said calmly. And so does my attorney. That was the first crack. Just a flicker in her eyes. Fear quickly masked. She signed it, Elaine insisted. She wanted me to handle things. You were always too sentimental. Sentimental. I thought of Mom labeling boxes. Of her hiding that letter where only I would think to look. Of the way she'd held my hand and said, Trust yourself. You sold the house while I was burying her, I said quietly. If you truly believed she wanted this, you wouldn't have done it in secret. Her voice rose. I did what had to be done. That word again. Had. As if necessity excused everything. I handed her a copy of the will. She read it once.
Twice.
Then again, slower. Her face drained of color. "This isn't real," she whispered. "It is," I said. "And the power of attorney you used was revoked months ago." She laughed then, sharp and brittle. "You always were Mom's favorite." That hurt more than I expected. "She loved us both," I said. "But she trusted me." Elaine's hands shook as she folded the paper back. "You're going to ruin me," she said. "Do you know that?" I thought about answering, about telling her how she had ruined me first, how she had hollowed out my grief and replaced it with suspicion and paperwork and court dates. But I didn't. "I'm not ruining you," I said. "You did that yourself." She left without another word. 2 weeks later, the buyers filed a complaint. The sale was frozen. Word began to spread, not just in legal circles, but through family, through neighbors, through the quiet grapevine that exists in every community. Cousins called. An aunt I hadn't spoken to in years asked if it was true. A neighbor stopped me in the grocery store and squeezed my arm gently, her eyes soft with understanding. Elaine stopped answering calls. Her lawyer did the talking now. At mediation, she wouldn't look at me, sat rigid in her chair, jaw clenched, hands folded tight in her lap. When the mediator laid out the evidence, the forged signature, the revoked authority, the letter, Elaine's composure finally broke. She cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears slipping down her cheeks. For a moment, I almost reached for her. Almost. But then she spoke. "I just didn't want to be left with nothing," she said. Nothing. I thought of the way Mom had loved her anyway, of all the second chances, all the excuses. The ruling came swiftly after that. The sale was voided. The house returned to the estate. Elaine was ordered to repay legal fees and faced potential charges, charges that were eventually reduced, mercifully, after restitution, and assigned admission of wrongdoing. The house was mine. But winning didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing in the ruins of something that once mattered. The day Elaine moved the last of her remaining boxes out, she stopped at the end of the driveway. Turned back to look at the house one last time. At me. "I never meant to hurt you," she said. I believed she believed that. But belief doesn't undo damage. "I know," I replied. "But you did." She nodded, got into her car, and drove away. I watched until she disappeared down the road, the silence settling in behind her like a held breath. That night, I unlocked the front door again. This time, it was mine. But as I stepped inside, surrounded by echoes and empty rooms, one question lingered, one I hadn't prepared for. Now that justice had been served, what was I supposed to do with the rest of my grief? The house didn't welcome me back the way I thought it would. I expected relief. Closure. Some cinematic moment where I'd step inside and finally breathe again. Instead, the air felt heavy, thick with memories that no longer knew where to settle. Every room echoed in a way it never had before, like the walls were still waiting for the people we used to be. I slept on the living room floor that first night. Not because I had to, but because the bedroom felt too intimate, too final. I spread an old quilt I'd found in the hall closet, the one Mom used during winter afternoons, and lay there listening to the house creak and sigh. Every sound carried a story. Every shadow asked a question. Grief doesn't end when justice begins. It just changes shape. In the mornings, I cleaned. Not aggressively. Not like I was erasing anything. Slowly. Deliberately. I dusted shelves that would soon hold memories again. I washed windows that hadn't seen daylight since Elaine stripped the place bare. The smell of soap and lemon filled the rooms, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt something close to purpose. I found Mom everywhere. In the way sunlight hit the kitchen counter at exactly 4 in the afternoon. In the faint stain on the wall, where she once leaned too close to a candle. In the creak of the third stair she always warned visitors about. I talked to her out loud sometimes. "I handled it," I'd say, standing in the hallway. "I hope I did right." And somehow, the house felt less quiet when I did. Elaine didn't call again. Months passed. The legal dust settled. Family gatherings adjusted around an absence no one quite knew how to name. Some relatives treated me like I'd done something brave. Others avoided the topic entirely, as if silence might smooth over what had happened. I didn't correct them. This wasn't about being right. It was about being honest. One afternoon, while organizing the last of Mom's things, I found another envelope tucked inside an old cookbook. This one wasn't legal. It wasn't offensive. It was just her. "Don't let bitterness take up space where love once lived," she'd written. "Anger is loud, but peace lasts longer." I sat at the kitchen table and let those words settle. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't something you give all at once. It comes in pieces. On quiet days. In moments when the anger loosens its grip long enough for you to breathe. I forgave Elaine, not by calling her, not by reconciling, but by choosing not to carry her choices with me anymore. The house slowly filled again. Not with furniture at first, but with life. Friends came by with casseroles and awkward hugs. Neighbors stopped to chat. I planted flowers where Mom once did, my hands deep in the soil, the sun warm on my back. There was comfort in repetition, healing in routine. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sky soften into dusk, I realized something important. The house had never really been about walls or ownership.
It was about stewardship.
About who stays when things get hard. Who listens. Who shows up. Mom knew that. That's why she left it to me. Before I end this, let me ask you something, my besties, because stories like this aren't just mine. Where are you listening from today? Here in the UK, the US, or somewhere else? And as you listen, tell me in the comments, what would you have done if someone betrayed you while you were grieving? Would you have fought back? Walked away? Or forgiven sooner than I could? Sometimes, when the house is quiet at night, I still hear her. Not her voice exactly, but the echo of it. In the way the floorboards settle. In the way the wind nudges the curtains like a gentle reminder that nothing we love ever truly leaves us. Loss doesn't vanish. It learns how to sit beside us without demanding everything we have. What my sister did broke something in me, but it also revealed something stronger. It showed me that love can be prepared in advance. That protection doesn't always look like confrontation. It can look like a folded letter, hidden carefully, waiting for the right moment to speak. My mother knew who I was long before I did. She knew I would stay. She knew I would endure. And she trusted me to carry the truth when she no longer could. If you're listening right now and you're dealing with betrayal layered on top of grief, I want you to hear this clearly because no one told me when I needed it most. You are not wrong for standing up for yourself. You are not cruel for choosing justice. And you are not weak for still loving people who hurt you. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means deciding what gets to live in your heart and what doesn't. Before I go, my besties, tell me one more thing in the comments. Where are you listening from today? And be honest with me, would you have done what I did? Or would you have chosen a different path? This is Voice of Mrs. Addison. Thank you for sitting with me through this story. If it moved you, if it made you feel seen, please like and subscribe so we can keep telling the kinds of stories that remind us we're not alone. Until next time, take care of your heart